Runtime is over, and I just wanted to talk about Resident Evil 8, which I played on my stream the other day. Ever since the reboot of the Resident Evil franchise with Resident Evil 7 in 2017, the mere mention of the franchise could make a man cream his pants right then and there, and I was one of those people. I was absolutely busting a nut every single time the name was mentioned, and when Resident Evil 8 was announced back in, 2019, I was on an endless stream of just semen peemen. I couldn't stop. And needless to say, I pulled the ultimate gamer sin and I pre-ordered it. You know, we all learned from Cyberpunk that you shouldn't pre-order games, but I didn't learn enough because I had that much faith in the franchise. And to nobody's surprise, it's a pretty good game. Personally, I was a super big fan of Resident Evil 7, so I was expecting a lot out of Resident Evil Village, and I'm happy that it delivered on most, if not all of it. I mean, it was a really enjoyable experience overall. So I'm just going to talk about some things that I liked and some things I disliked about the game. So starting with the big thing in the Resident Evil franchise, the ambiance, the surrounding feeling regarding the game, which is just outstanding. It's 10 out of 10 for me. Resident Evil has always been super good at, playing all of their mechanics, all of their gameplay in general, into giving you that feeling of dread, into giving you that feeling of uncomfortableness. Like, you have the inventory, which is super janky and hard to work with, which makes you all the more uncomfortable. You have the sounds, you have the visuals, you have the actual content, which all just contributes to this really good just ambiance. Like, sometimes you'll just be walking down a normal little alleyway and you'll hear a sound come out from the side and your heart rate will spike up to 150. And on the note of audio, I just want to mention something I really liked. So with some of the, we all know about the vampire people in the castle, so I'm just going to mention them. But the non-human people, their microphones have noticeably lower quality and peak a lot easier than everybody else's, all of the human characters' mics. So it gives them that eerie feeling that the rest of the characters don't have. That, or the audio quality was just complete dog shit, because also later in the game, in the end credits scene, there was these two people talking. I'm not going to say where, not to spoil, but they were just talking, and the mic quality sounded like it was ripped straight out of Assassin's Creed 1, just NPC dialogue. It just sounded absolutely god-awful, and that makes me doubt the entire non-human bad mic quality thing, but I'm just going to be optimistic and think of it as a thing that they intended. But yeah, no, going on from that, the story, I mean, let's be honest, nobody really goes to a Resident Evil game to witness the story ever since Resident Evil 6. I mean, even in Resident Evil 4, you're an action star put in a horror environment just so you can save the president's daughter, and you're jumping through lasers and busting through walls. It's like nobody really cares about the story, they just care about the spectacle, and Resident Evil 8 is very similar to that. Resident Evil 7 was definitely more spooky, definitely more horror oriented, while Resident Evil 8, it was a mix of both worlds. You had some action and you had some horror. But that led to an issue or two where they couldn't commit to either one. So both of them sort of just seemed slightly lackluster in the end, and some level design wasn't the best. And that's mainly because they couldn't decide on what to go with, horror or original Resident Evil action spectacle. But regardless, there's not much to say about the story. It's serviceable. I mean, if you're sleeping on this game because you liked Resident Evil 7 and you're scared the story will make you pull a full Game of Thrones Season 8 on it, then don't be. I mean, it's pretty good. It's not thought-provoking or profound, but it's perfectly serviceable. But going on to the gameplay. The gameplay in Resident Evil 8, like I said a second ago, it was a lot more action-oriented than the last one. There was a lot more to do. There was a lot more blood, gore, and tits flying around. But it was very similar. The gameplay was pretty much copy-paste from Resident Evil 7, which sort of came off as lazy and uninspired. I mean, the gameplay works, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't anything different. It wasn't even as different as Last of Us 1 and Last of Us 2, you know? It was the same exact gameplay. There were some puzzles in the game, but they weren't hard. You never really lost your sense of direction, but the game doesn't hold your hand either, so it sort of takes a minute or two to figure out puzzles. Nothing amazing, nothing difficult. And going on about the puzzles, The thing I mentioned about spectacle versus horror a second ago definitely leads into this, because there were some levels about midway through the game where you didn't even have to think. The puzzles weren't even hard. You just had to run around and fetch stuff from different locations. It pretty much pointed it out where it was, or where whatever you had to get was. And after that, you just had this whole, hide and seek session where you didn't really have any of the core gameplay elements put into that whole maybe hour or 2 hour block of the game, maybe hour and a half. And one nice thing I noticed about this game, for like all of you Outlast players that missed 90% of the lore because it was all in 50-page documents, in this game, though there are some dumps towards the end of the game, all of the documents that you can read, they're relatively short. There may be about, I want to say 25 words per document, maybe 50 words. They're really short and consumable, which I thought was a great change, because in most games you'll see like entire declarations of independence as oh my god. And I thought that was really nice, because in most games you'll see entire declarations of independence in the lore documents that you have to search to actually coherently piece everything together. But yeah, that was a nice little thing that I thought was cool. And on the note of gameplay, you probably noticed that I haven't had any video footage of me playing it on my stream. That's because several times throughout the course of the game, I don't know if anybody has had this problem as well, but multiple times throughout the game, my game crashed. But it didn't just crash, it crashed my entire computer. And I don't have a bad computer by any means. I have an RTX 2080 Super, I have a Ryzen 9 3900, and after every maybe 3 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, the game would freeze, it would lock my desktop, it would keep me from restarting. I couldn't control alt delete, so the only thing I could do was just kill switch my computer, which was really unfortunate because it corrupted about 9 hours of footage. But yeah, I don't know if it had to do with the level loading, but every single time I'd climb up a ladder into a new section of the game, I don't know if it had to load in, but it would just nuke my entire computer, just throw it in the microwave on reheat. But yeah, no, overall, on my fake scale that I haven't named yet, I think I'm going to give Resident Evil around an 80%. It's really not anything special compared to the last game. It's super hard to distinct the two other than the environments, because everything's almost identical. But that being said, nothing is really bad in it. The story is serviceable, the gameplay is serviceable but uninspired. There's a lot more gunplay, and when there is gunplay, it's really exciting. That's really what gets your boner pumping. But yeah, if you liked Resident Evil 7 and you're sleeping on this one, I definitely say get it. Just when you go into it, don't expect to have a firmly horror game that you're playing, because it's definitely a balance between horror and action, which is more Resident Evil-like in my opinion. But yeah, no, that's all I have to say. Peace.